Our presentation is on the tribe Huns. Attila the Hun was the leader or king of the Hun tribe. All the poor Huns lived in houses of brick that were not very nice. But Attila and all his chiefs lived in houses of wood and brick that was carved really nice and the wood was polished really good. One day Attila's servant was out in the field and noticed that one of his ox foot was really covered in blood. And so he searched the ground to see what did it and found a sword poking out of the ground. He went and brought it to Attila, and Attila said it was the sword of a war god. He said he would wear it till he died, and so he did. And then after that, Attila went on a campaign.
As Attila was on campaign, he destroyed most of Gaul, the Vandals country, in the little area. Then he moved south and started to attack Rome. And at one point, he was so strong and fierce that he was about to take Rome and the Vandals over. But the Vandals and Rome teamed up against him, and they met in the field challenge next to a swamp, and Attila withdrew and came back. And at one point, he was on the outside walls of Rome when their army was away. When Attila the Hun was outside of Rome, a Christian priest came out of the city and walked right into Attila's camp. He walked into his tent and he made Attila the Hun realize that if he attacked Rome, bad things would happen. Many people thought that Paul the Apostle and Peter came to him in a vision and told Attila that if you attack Rome, many disasters will happen to you. So Attila the Hun believed it, and he left Rome, and he came back to his palace, his wooden palace, on the river Danube. Several days after this, he died, and his followers cut off their hair and gashed their faces, that blood rather than tears would flow for him. And after this, they told their servants to bury Attila. Attila was put in 3 coffins, one of gold, next of silver, and the next of iron. And they told the servants to go bury him. After this, the servants came back and they killed the servants. And that's the end of Attila the Hun.
So nobody would know where he was buried? Is that why they killed him?
Yes.
The Vandals. Shortly after the death of Attila, Rome was once more in the hands of an invader, Genseric the Vandal. The Vandals were great wanderers. They slowly made their way from the shores of the Baltic Sea to the Danube, passed through what is now France, and went south into Spain. Only 9 miles from Spain, just across what is now the Strait of Gibraltar, lay Africa. Africa belonged to Rome. It was one of her most valued provinces because, while Italy could not raise enough grain to feed her people, Africa could supply all that was needed. Genseric longed to add Africa to his domain, and he was more fortunate than most men who wished to invade a country. For after a little while, he received a cordial invitation to come to Africa and bring his soldiers with him.
The invitation was given by no less a man than a brave general, Boniface, the appointed governor of the province. This is the way it came about. Aetius was jealous of the success of Boniface, and he persuaded his mother of the child emperor to send the governor a letter recalling him. Then he himself wrote a letter to his friend Boniface, with a warning that the empress was angry with him and he would lose his head if he risked it in Rome. Boniface had a hard position. He concluded that the safest thing for him to do was to remain where he was and ask Genseric to help him hold Africa. Genseric did not want to be urged. He hurried across the Strait of Gibraltar and began his victories. A Vandal conquest was more severe than any other tribe, for the Vandals seemed to delight in ruining everything that came into their power. They killed men, women, and children, and they burned houses, churches, and destroyed whatever treasure they could not carry away with them. Some said that whenever they conquered a country, they would cut down every fruit tree within its limits. This is why people who seem to enjoy spoiling things are sometimes called vandals. After a while, Boniface discovered how he'd been tricked by Aetius, and he begged Genseric to leave the country. The barbarian refused, and Boniface could not drive him away. Genseric and his followers settled in Africa, making the city of Carthage the capital of their kingdom. They became a nation of pirates and built light swift vessels and ran up on the shore of any country where they expected to find plunder.
My presentation in class is about the Visigoths and their leader. The Visigoths lived on the shores of Danube, in the middle of two armies, the Huns and the Romans. The Huns were pushing the Visigoths into the Roman Empire, but the Romans were pushing them back into the Huns Empire. The Visigoths made a bargain with the Romans that if they gave them food and water, the Visigoths would protect the Roman border. Apparently, both sides were broken with their agreement. The Visigoths bribed the Roman officers in giving them more food and keeping their weapons, and they were supposed to give their weapons up to the Romans. But the Romans, however, did not give them any food, and hungry men with weapons in their hands make fierce enemies. A Visigoth named Alaric became leader of the Visigoths and attacked Greece. For its plunder of gold and silver, they feasted there right after they assaulted and took over the country. Finally, a Roman general named Stilicho attacked Alaric but was defeated. The Eastern Emperor made Alaric the master general of the Eastern Illyricum. Alaric set out to Rome, and the Western Emperor fled because of the master general, Alaric. He was afraid of him and would have been captured if not Stilicho appeared.
Six years later, the young emperor was now at the age of 25, but his wisdom did not grow. This emperor thought that Stilicho wanted the throne, so he killed the only man that could have protected it. Now was the time for Alaric's move. Alaric marched onto Rome, but the Romans were arrogant. They did not think that a mere barbarian would be able to take their city. But the Romans said that they would surrender if Alaric would give them generous terms of surrender. If not, they said, then sound your trumpets for attack. Alaric declared that he would leave if all the gold and silver were given to him from the city. But because of the Romans' persuasive influence, he then agreed on 5,000 pounds of gold, 30,000 pounds of silver, 4,000 garments of silk, 3,000 pounds of pepper. 2 years later, Alaric, however, was not happy, so he stormed the city. He told his men not to ruin churches or slaughter the people. But the men saw that if anyone was hiding their treasure from him, or they thought, they killed the people. After this, the army left. But Alaric again was not satisfied. He made plans to take Africa and Sicily. But it all came to a tragic stop, for Alaric died. For an honorable funeral, his highest officers and their servants made a dam in the river. They then, when the river dried up, dug a grave in the riverbed. They then buried him with the finest Roman robes and their finest of treasure.
Then they undammed the river and slaughtered the servants, should robbery and dishonor come to his grave.
Clovis and the Franks. Out of all the Teutons who came to live on the Roman territory, the Franks were the most important, or also known as the freemen. They had no wish to wander the world and conquer every land they saw. At this time, they settled at the mouth of the Rhine River, and they held on to it, adding more and more territory. At this time, each tribe had its chief, and Clovis, one of these chiefs, came at last to rule them all. When Clovis was 21, he led his men against the Roman governor at Soissons and took the place. The most valuable treasures were usually kept in the churches, and the Franks took great delight in seizing these. Among the church treasures captured at Rheims was a marvelously beautiful vase. Now the bishop of Rheims was friends with Clovis and knew him, and he sent a messenger to beg Clovis that even if the soldiers wouldn't return all of the holy vessels, they would at least return the vase. So at Soissons, when all the warriors were gathered together, the king pointed to the vase and said, "I ask you, O most valiant warriors, not to refuse to me the vase in addition to my rightful parts." Most of the soldiers were wise enough not to refuse so powerful of a chief, but one did refuse, and he swung his battle axe and crushed the vase, crying, "Thou shalt receive nothing of this unless a just lot gives it to thee." Clovis said nothing, but went to the vase, picked up the broken pieces, and gave it to the messenger. But however, the next year he remembered this, and when he was reviewing his troops, he came to the man and said, this man's weapons aren't in fit condition. So he swung his axe and struck the soldier dead, saying, "Thus thou didst to the vase at Soissons." Clovis showed himself so much stronger than the other chiefs of the Franks that at length they accepted him as their king.
Soon after, Clovis got married to a Christian woman named Claudia. Claudia tirelessly asked him to become a Christian, but he always refused, wanting to stay with his gods and religion. But in one battle, when the battle was favoring on the enemy, Clovis remembered his wife and her religion, and he shouted out, "Jesus Christ, in whom Claudia declares to be the Son of God, I will believe in you if I win this battle." Then Claudius won and had no doubt that his prayers had been answered. And soon when he came back to his house, he was baptized. And after he was baptized, he said, "I'm not going to make all my men and my country become Christians." But when he came out to talk to his people, everyone shouted, "We will believe in we are ready to follow the immortal God." Clovis died in 511. But before that, all the land between the lower Rhine and the Pyrenees mountains had been obliged to acknowledge Clovis as their king. He took Paris as his capital, and Clovis's descendants has holded his throne for 2 centuries and a half.